Yo, what's up, everybody? I'm your host, Zenitsu, and you're listening to the Digi Talks podcast, the show that covers various topics from news to meta developments and everything in between for the fine folks who love the Digimon trading card game. Just as a quick reminder, right now, streaming it live over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu is on hold, but fear not, I still do other things on my Twitch channel. But if you're curious where to actually find this, content. It's always going to be uploaded on the YouTube channel of Zenitsu, as well as being on various podcasting platforms like Spotify for your viewing and listening pleasure. So please feel free to do that whole social media doobly-doo thing and leave that rating, like, subscribe, follow, whatever, depending on the platform that you're listening on. It really does help support the podcast, or I like to think it does. So today I am with a very, very special guest. One that I hold in a really high regards, and I have watched his content and appreciated his opinions over the years. And that is going to be Mario from Mario Gaming World. So feel free to introduce yourself and chill and plug yourself away.
Yes, hi, hello. My name is Mario from Mario's Gaming World. Uh, Most of you watching this will know me from my Digimon content on YouTube and on Twitch. Uh, that's 99% of my content, with a little bit of Splash and Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon here and there. As far as Digimon goes, I have been playing the game since that special pre-release, late 2020. And I've basically been, present more or less for the last 6 years. I've won two Digimon Premier events in my day and topped at least a dozen others. So that is who I am. Thank you, Zenitsu, for having me, and let's get going.
Yeah, so before we actually get into the greater topic, because this is one that I talked about Tesoro a lot, and that is like the shifts and changes in Digimon and the speed and balance of everything. I always like to kick it over to the comment section to kind of just get a little bit more community involvement. So I do have two comments. One of them is from Ashes Fall. They state that I'll have to find another tournament on Wednesdays to play in once Mario goes back into the ether. I know Ashes Fall is a very interesting character, but yeah, so that's that comment. And then the other one's from Benjamin Wiseman. This is in comments to the leaks that happened because Bandai decided to spoil a good portion of the next set. How does that even happen? Um, well, it's pretty simple. Very big miscommunication between uh, who's actually designing and who's running events and planning all that stuff. So that kind of is that. And as far as Ash's thing, there's online locals that I could go to when it comes to DCGO content, but I'm curious, what are your future plans with Digimon Mario?
That's a great question, and still a really, really big variable. I'm measuring a lot of things right now, both life related and card game related, gaming related, so to speak. Uh, right now, as it stands, the Wednesday tournaments, I'll keep doing them at least for as long as they're entertaining, which should be for a little bit. EX12 just came out, so that's helpful. It'll spice things up a little bit. Uh, I'm not surprised that Ashes Fall would want to go to a different tournament, and that's okay. Not a big deal. But yeah, there's a lot of variables with Digimon. Uh, I am, building a deck, so I'm not like an updated deck, nothing old, nothing like that. But I am, I have put things together to get a deck sent to me, so we're all good. So as far as we're going right now, short term, still am giving the game a try, and we'll see what happens from there. And yeah, that's. I feel like more of my thoughts will come out in the greater conversation. So we'll just leave it for that.
Probably, because right now I'm having fun in your tournaments. You've held two of them so far. I did a little bit better the second time around than the first time around. Um, Probably just because, I don't know, I changed decks to something I enjoyed a little bit better. That's
Mhm.
all I can think of that changed, because fundamentally the decks that I were playing were relatively similar in play style and play pattern, but I just was way more comfortable playing the deck I played last week.
Good.
Because most people probably write off Reboot Mon as like a joke deck, and I actually think like it has a lot of competitive elements. So, like, I know you took a big break from Digimon about a year or so. What do you think were the changes like that you immediately felt between a year ago and now?
Well, the game in a sense is way faster um, than it was a year ago when I had to stop for a while there. You know, when I came out, I believe it was when I stopped, I believe it was BT 22, and we were just getting all those tamers and whatever. But I came back into this environment where like you have a bunch of decks that can just eliminate you on the third turn and rather easily. I think Reboot Mon is a little bit niche because it seems like one of those decks where you're saying you have to try to answer me and it's going to be very hard for you to do so, and isn't necessarily as quick as other decks, but it tries to develop a bit of an alternative strategy, which is refreshing because the first tournament that I held, it was Beelstar and it was Glowing Dawn and a little bit of Red Hybrid in there, and I think Volcanismon, and the games were ending very quickly, like like really fast, really fast. On the tournament from last Wednesday, people actually were going to time, which surprised me. But I guess people were trying their new cards and all that, maybe unfamiliar a little bit with how the new synergies worked and whatever. A lot of questions, stuff like that. But the main difference is things are definitely a lot faster. Also, I can't ignore the major change when I was reacting to cards and saw that some Digimon cards now are also option cards. And that, I am not a big fan of that. I think that is like power creep to the next level. And it seems like it's like almost every 10 sets or so something crazy happens. Because BT14 and the Star decks before that introduced aces. A dozen sets later, now we have these option Digimon cards. And they are very powerful. Like I haven't read one that I'm like, oh, this card's just okay. Now, they're all pretty good in their own special ways, and some are a lot more powerful than others. So it's interesting. It's just very fast. Very, very, very fast. You can just build up, you can OTK, and you can call it a day. You know what I mean? Like that's the main noticeable difference for me anyway, compared to a year ago. It
Uh,
wasn't
yeah,
quite like that.
yeah, decks definitely have gotten faster. That means you missed, oh my god, you missed the best of times, Mario. You missed Hoodie Loop, and you missed when Rox and Medusa were at their height of power. Man, those were some good times.
I heard, and my chat educated on what Hudimon was, and I'm very glad I wasn't around for that because that seemed toxic. Toxic's a good word that I'd use to describe that. Like that's just crazy talk.
Yeah, we were all curious what they would hit from Hoodie, and then they just decided to hit the DNA. That was allowing the combo to exist, and actually, that did a significant. It was the right call at the end of the day, because people were thinking like how to tackle the problem, and Bandai usually actually has pretty good ban and restrictions. Oh, but you missed the outrage of the last ban and restriction list. Like that was a doozy.
Well, if I remember correctly, it hit a bunch of like loop cards, like oh, what's that card's? I can't remember the card's name. It hit a very old loop card.
Yeah, Myotismon from
Yeah,
BT3.
yeah, as well as hitting the Cerberus X engine, I believe.
Yeah, it took them long enough.
And My opinion on that is uh it was a marketing strategy, to be truthfully honest, because sets come out, right? And they release these purple cards and they release, what appears to be purple engines. But if nothing else is as good as what currently exists, which is Cerberus Mon X, and it keeps topping events and even world championships, well, then that's going to have an impact on sales. So I think that that was long overdue in the sense that, now that that engine is dead, Bandai can produce other selling and practical purple engines that you can kind of pick from.
Interesting you say that, because I've gotten into many arguments that this was 100% a ban list not for balancing, but for money. Like, this showed, to me, it showed Bandai's hand that they are in full greed mode this year, and they have been holding very true to that, in my perspective. I don't necessarily appreciate it, but because we have a new rarity on top of that new card type, on top of just power creep being pushed to the maximum. So, like, that's kind of where I'm coming from when it came to seeing what they did for that ban and restriction list. And it really has me curious what they're going to do next, but we're not going to see what they do next for a while, because I still personally think they need to ban and restrict more cards and more often. Because I've said this again, and I'll keep saying it because it needs to be repeated. Bandai should learn from other card games. Wizards of the Coast is one of the biggest ones, and even they said, "Hey, if we're printing too much shit and we're not checking our homework to see what's broken, we're just actually going to have to pay attention and ban cards more proactively." And Bandai doing their dedicated 2 a year is not necessarily helping the game in my perspective. When Wizards of the Coast is just like, we held it to 1 a year, and that clearly is not working, so now we're going to do 4 or 5 a year. And I was just like, that's what Bandai should be doing.
Yeah, I think there definitely should be more ban lists. It's multi-purpose for Bandai. They can use their ban list to sell more product egregiously, which you can really see that in Yu-Gi-Oh! And also you can hit problems faster. I can count on both my hands the number of decks that have existed for too long in between ban lists that could have been fixed, and problems could have been eliminated a lot quicker, instead of hearing a lot of players on the internet going, "Oh, this deck is broken. Oh, we've had this forever. Blah 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 blah." You know, it would kind of fix that, and it would actually show Bandai's, that they have a pulse on the community and a pulse on the card game that they're creating, and they're able to identify the threats. You know, if not proactively, which, to be fair, they sort of kind of have. You know, with Apoclymon, Anubismon, with HPD. You know, to a certain extent, they're good at that kind of stuff and hitting a bunch of the memory producing cards. They already did a bunch of damage in previous metas, absolutely. But keeping Hammer Spark at 4, Gravity Crush at 4, and Blinding Ray at 4, Jack Raid at 4, for a long time to come still would have done a lot more damage. So I think Bandai is learning to definitely balance the two. A, money, but B, balance of the meta game and allowing, old stuff to be eliminated. And I think that Cerberus Monhit was kind of a telltale sign of that, in my opinion, anyway.
Right, because a lot of people are going to be like, well, they're doing it because of Plutomon. We have no idea what any of the Plutomon stuff is going to be in BT26. But the way that they phrased everything screamed that this was more for monetary purposes, just to clean house a little bit, to let whatever is going to be coming out in BT26 for Plutomon breathe a little bit more, even though it just feels like it's going to end up being more Time Stranger slop or Titan slop or whatever they're going to end up doing, just because the power creep has been a little bit egregious ever since probably BT23. It just feels like they really want to push what the newest thing is, and so far and so hard, that it literally makes almost everything else unplayable. BT25 was the biggest example of this for me personally because I saw the meta contrast. Like, I had the data for EX11 and didn't really have good data for BT24 because that was like mid holiday. But EX11 we had some data for. 8001 we had more data for. And now going into BT25, just seeing like, oh, the decks that were updated in 8001 or were played in 8001 now are no longer playable. And we were left with 6 brand new decks that came out in BT25. And according to the data, if that's basically what is the only things that are competitively viable is those 6 brand new decks. I guess technically one is a slightly older deck, considering it was Jupitermon and it just got updates in BT25, but still
Mhm.
highlights a lot of problematic play patterns in a sense that all of these modern decks are doing. And maybe that's like your feeling on not liking the dual cards is because like option removal for the longest time has been completely irrelevant. So this was like their solution to try to make option removal more viable. But the problem is memory gain and memory generation and how are you using the memory system is like completely screwed up. So like the increased cost isn't really felt very much because the trade-off is like there's always pros and cons, pulls, pushes and pulls. Like you spend a little bit more, you get a lot more. But the way that we're using it, we're not spending any more than we have already, and we're getting even more effects.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
and then my big fear was like this was their excuse to push immunities even higher. So like that's partially why I played Rebootmon is because I looked at the data and I saw that 60% of people are not playing the 40% of or 60% of people were not playing the 75% of topping meta decks. So I had a pretty good chance that I could probably dodge all the way up till the end, like my bad matchups. And because nothing, like, there's not a lot of option removal right now, and the decks that are doing good are option removal heavy. That's why I felt like it was really safe to to play Reboot, is because he just dumps so hard on everything that came before him. And lo and behold, the only things that were beating him were the new things that were being played.
Mhm, yeah.
I mean, granted, I learned the Volcanus matchup. Bears, I got really lucky. Um, but like you mentioned about a year ago, like your solutions to fix Digimon, do you think any of those still hold true?
Oh, that video, right. You know, I feel like as we progress further and more stuff happens, and as we get things like option freaking Digimon cards, it gets harder to fix things the way I would want them fixed. And to be, crystal clear here, I'm not saying my solutions are the be end all of what can be done to fix the game. However, uh, I prior to when I stopped in September last year, I would spend a lot of my time talking to a lot of Digimon people, and a lot of the stuff had parallels. A lot of people do think the game is kind of too fast, and this doesn't help. Like one of the biggest things that I noticed when I came back here was ace cards are pretty much like not relevant anymore for the most part. I can't tell you the last time I've seen an ace card played. In my two locals, not a great sample size, but whatever. Nothing. Like no ace cards. Machine Dramon gets an ace card now. That's a beautiful thing. But like, is it really going to see, the time of day? Probably not, because ace cards are too slow. Because you can interact with people, um, you know, like you can break their boards, then they can't ace you, and their really only form of interaction is gone unless their deck contains, in-house on body um, interruption effects, which aren't super common. So there's that. I do think the game, I stand by this, it needs more biting crush cards. Like you have an option that just sits on the board, and when your opponent does something to trigger it, like biting crush, you activate it and you get a powerful effect. That would be interaction. And then that might give you a chance to interact with all the fast decks happening right now just by playing those option cards. Because this game has no hand traps besides aces, and those only work when you attack. So, like, I think there needs to be more interaction, and generally speaking, yeah. I don't know. What do you think?
It's very interesting because I made one like 2 years ago, and some of the points are still holding true, and then some of the points are like completely irrelevant. And some of them were like slightly addressed in a sense. Because the one I made like 2 or 3 years ago, I was like stating that trash based interactions are like actually getting kind of disgusting and we don't have enough trash hate. And they slowly introduced more. Not a lot to where it's like super prevalent and it matters, but like the big thing that I noticed with the changes in the speed of the game is because of those speed shifts, it literally took an OTK deck to like not in an OTK level. So the prime example that I get, like I like to explain, is you look at rocks and minerals coming from like EX10, where magnetic can kill you on turn 3. Well, that's too slow. So he can't kill you on turn 3 anymore because the game the opponent generally is able to put so much pressure that they don't have the opportunity to OTK. So if they're playing towards that play pattern, then they're just going to end up losing because now we're in this like weird dynamic where player A builds the board, does some big initial damage, and then it's up to player B to be able to instantaneously respond to that, break the opponent's board, deal some nominal damage back to them, and then it's back on players A's turn to instantaneously rebuild out of thin air and then be able to do all of that again. So like this is why DNA is like in a really hot spot because like DNA adds an extra sense of rush to the game. So it's just like off of an empty board, I could DNA, or like if I'm able to make a DNA out of thin air, then my Digimon can attack. Because one of the big changes that it felt like with the game, probably starting from realistically EX11, was a lot of things just have the magical line of text, then this Digimon can attack. And there's like 6 keywords that allow you to do it also, where it's just like, oh, end of a turn, just make an attack. Do I care? Not really. Just do it anyway. Does it have rush? It does now. So I feel like the combination between like how fast we're playing plus the extra forms of aggression really put a lot of stress and strain on this particular play pattern. What do you feel?
Yeah, uh, I'm in complete agreement. If everything can attack after the memory gauge, if you, there was a situation that popped up in my last locals. I can't remember what exactly it was, but basically there was an end of turn trigger. There was an attack. The memory gauge passed. A guy evolved into something or played something. It could attack. So he was past the memory gauge, so he attacked because the card said he could do that. Then end of turn trigger happened, which allowed something else to happen, which then let the guy attack for game. All in end of turn.
Yep.
And, I remember back in the day when the memory gauge was the be all end all, you know, we had Blitz in BT5, but Blitz wasn't that common. And, if you wanted to get cheeky, yeah, you played Blitz. And now it seems like every single deck can do it. Not just the decks that are a little more aggressive and play Blitz, and not just some niche little combos that give you back memory. It's like everything can play at the end of your turn. And
No,
when everything can,
100%.
like when every deck can do that, every deck can kill you on turn three because it's like turn three plus, where you get to play in your end phase and just kill your opponent. Like that's just too much. And that's it.
Yeah, I feel like it is a little on the egregious side how much they printed that type of effects, and like it really started ramping up as around EX11 more specifically, cuz Hoodie didn't have any end of a turn this card can attack. It's just like, no, I'm just going to create this value engine and steamroll the opponent as quickly as possible. And it really wasn't until EX11 with just more vortex. You had more execute. You had Medusamon's tamer that just enabled it. Then going into 8001, you had the Marcus and Agumon tamer. So like you could really start to see when they started ramping that up, and as a result, it just like if you can't keep up, you got to get out. And that's the unfortunate thing when it came to their power creep is like, oh, I invested in Medusamon in EX11, and now Medusamon is like bottom end of barely playable. Literally one set, realistically one set later. It's just like, okay, so what's BT26 gonna do? I mean, granted, they're trying to update literally nothing but Glowing Dawn, Data Squad, and Time Strangers bullshit. Um, so like that's just gonna continue. And now we have dual options that are changing how removal types are working. But when it comes to like interactions, it really feels like they're just trying to have sticky, annoying Digimon types of interactions because we saw that with Calismon from BT25, and we're seeing it with TB right now, where it's just like, oh, I just do my thing. If it dies, cool. I get a whole bunch of on deletes, replay an army of Digimon, and then just start hard slamming Susanomon over and over again until the opponent can't play the game. So it's getting a little crazy in my perspective as well. But this is kind of where Tessero said that he's okay with this type of a game speed because there is arguably like more interactions going on because they are trying to normalize the counter ability to where if you do have a mega level on the field, the opponent has to either remove it or respect it. And then there's more floodgatey type stuff like SW, where their whole game plan is literally just sit on a couple of guys that state when the opponent sneezes, remove their body. So,
Mhm.
um, I don't know how you feel about like the shift and how the back and forth went because before, it was mostly just play tamer, play memory boost, pass turn, and then just explode all over the opponent. Now we explode on turn two, and that changes everything.
So yeah, it is too much. Um, here's the thing, right? This is strongly opinion based, and it's also what Bandai wants. So what Bandai wants, what any card game company wants really, is they want a brand new Joe Blow anywhere in the world. He goes to his local card shop one day. He says, "You know what? I feel like buying into Digimon, you know, and I want to be worth my while." So the guy is going to go buy two starter decks, maybe get some singles from his friend, and then there you go, you have Glowing Dawn. Now, this brand new Joe Blow guy, he can go and topple regionals with Glowing Dawn. And then why can you do that? Because by essentially the way they power creep the game, they've made it easier for Joe Blow to go and top his event. Because all Joe Blow needs to do is kind of learn his deck and the odd interaction, and the combos are easy. So you just kind of go from there. So Joe Blow now can go top his regionals, he can go play nationals, and he's like, you know what? I feel really cool. And this is a good feeling. I like how this game makes me feel on the inside. Joe Blow now is going to go start buying boxes and boxes and boxes of Digimon until he gets sick of it. So by design, this is exactly what every company does. They have to make it essentially easier to kind of play the game. And, you know, whether that means taking your opponent from five security to game and they can interact with it, that's okay. Because if Bandai just keeps getting Joe Blows like that into their game, Bandai doesn't care who buys their cards. They just want people to buy their cards. The more the merrier. And by making the entry to play easier, that helps. Now, on Testro's point, it is an opinion. Like me, you, we grew up on BT1. Maybe he did too. I don't know.
He did
But
too.
like, great. So like, I um, miss the good old days. The good old days when you know, you evolve Gorillamon for one, you evolve into freaking, Weregarurumon for three, you evolve into Plesioamon for two, you go, you swing, you rinse and repeat the process, maybe you throw an Omnimon on there to get some board control, and the game was much slower. I really miss Lord Nightmon format. I know that depending on you know, people have high opinions on that one because Lord Nightmon was oppressive to some, but there was a really, really, really careful skill gap there. Where if you were playing Lord Nightmon, you're playing the mirror match, well, you knew not only did you have to build a stack in the back, you also had to build a stack in the front. Because if you promote your stack in the back and not build a stack in the front, and they answer it, you lost the game. Done. Go to the next game. But if you built that stack in the back and you put on offensive board presence, then if they answered your board presence, you were still out of game on your hands because you could answer with your stack in the back. So and games weren't over in turn three. There wasn't anything like that. It was slow. It was more of a battle of attrition. It was a battle of resources. It wasn't really archetypal. You didn't have 40 Agumon or Greymon cards in your deck. Stuff like that. You could have at a certain point. BT5 War Greymon is a really fun deck, but I digress. The point here is, myself, I prefer a lot more of a slower, meticulous game where you have more chances essentially to outplay your opponent. If you and I are playing Digimon right now, right? And I turn to you with angels, there's probably nothing you could have done. There is no interaction. You could be the best player in the world or the worst. I'm still going to OTK you with angels. I don't care who you are. And vice versa. You might OTK me with something. Doesn't matter if I'm the best player in the world or the worst player in the world. It does not matter. You just do what you got to do and you call it a day. So it just depends on which side of it you're. Obviously, the strategy is working for Bandai because their sales are still good. They can still continue to sell Digimon, and as long as they get rewarded with that revenue stream, this is just how it's going to be. That's it.
No, because you bring up it is a very interesting thing because every TCG does want that Joe Blow, but the way they go about the balancing act in the top level player versus an entry level player is done differently based on the systems and mechanics of the game. Digimon, it feels like, is electing to go more power creep, less variance, where a lot of other games try to increase their variance. Just like again, I'll bring back the big three because it's just the most easy examples.
Mhm.
Like Magic the Gathering, literally outside of the fact that is it decks are just really really good because they try to solve the consistency issue, there's just inherent consistency issues with inside of Magic's own systems and structures. Same thing with Pokemon, although Pokemon's a completely different case because they have a lot of cards that try to boost consistency insanely. um, but usually there is like some kind of consistency factor that is the equalizer. And like, sure, you could say like, oh, you could still brick in Digimon, but there's a lot less cards that we're running that reduce the brickage. And if the other opponent is also kind of like not going to kill you on turn two, then you are kind of just both playing into consistency cards to then start playing the game again.
Yeah. That yeah, Digimon is really weirdly weird because when you compare to other games, right? Pokemon has its draw supporters, which by Digimon standards would do crazy things, but they're once per turn. Uh, Magic, depending on the format you're playing, you might have lack of consistency to varying degrees of almost fluid-like consistency. Yu-Gi-Oh! Pretty freaking consistent depending on what game you're putting. Everything can grab everything. It kind of sort of seems. Um, but yeah, no, I agree. Digimon is handling this differently, and it works. And as long it works in the sense that the people are still buying the game, and as long as they keep doing it, it's just it's what they're gonna do. You know. And
Yeah.
everything is consistent. The whole theory of Digimon is that you evolve, you draw cards, you go through your deck, and there's your consistency. When that wasn't enough, they introduced memory boosts. When that wasn't enough, they introduced trainings. And you have already a plethora of Digimon with on-play search and whatever. And, Digimon decks by design are pretty consistent. It would be hard to play a Digimon deck that isn't consistent. You know what I mean?
No, I get it, especially now that everything's like we're basically in tribal area where everything it basically is like slop design type stuff where it's just like adventure slop, TS slop, or Shimbala slop, even though it's more like TB and SW, but they're their own
Hmm.
things and they're consistent because they're only playing within their own package. And like I do kind of miss the good old days where like you did have more variance because everything wasn't so hard archetypally locked. But like we ran into situations where because it wasn't hard archetypally locked, they were some of the more broken cards because everything can use it. So it's really this fine line that I don't know if Bandai has full control over. And I feel like them just going archetypal, while it does make deck building kind of just flat out more boring, it is easier to pinpoint where specific issues are because they're handing us pre-conned decks essentially.
Every card game has kind of gotten into it, and I don't know if you know this about me. The number one thing I've always enjoyed about Digimon the most, even today, is the deck building aspect. Every card game has archetypes. Digimon does, Pokemon occasionally does, Yu-Gi-Oh! Definitely does. Magic kind of has archetypes, sort of. I guess they do. Um,
They're heavier now than they
and
were in the
yeah,
past.
exactly. And they just, again, it's for the Joe Blows. It's easier for Joe Blow to put 50 time changer cards in a deck and call it a day. Easy deck building, just like that, boom and done. Joe Blow has easy entrance into Digimon. So the archetypal stuff isn't going away. And you actually know they're doing this on purpose because they're releasing other things in the Digimon space to bolster this. Liberator, I'm Strangers, Cyber Sleuth. They're basing things in real time, even in the case of Strangers and Liberator, into decks to help increase that. If you're playing Time Stranger, if you buy that game for the Switch or whatever, and you want to play with those cards, hey, guess what? Digimon's got you covered. Bandai made some nice sets for you, where you can play as your favorite characters from Time Stranger, and it works. It's no longer about color identity anymore. It's about archetypal identity, which is really fascinating. And I think that deck building is still a really important skill to have because while maybe 60 to 80% of your deck is solved, especially with the lack of side decks in this game, what you do with that 20% or so to help combat your other meta things, I think does differentiate skilled players from non-skilled players. That still exists, luckily, because you don't have to play 50 TS cards in a deck, which is
No,
good.
that's you're 100% correct on that because there's a lot of aspects to Digimon playing like a competitive deck that I feel like some players just are not either acknowledging or incorporating that could improve their overall deck's performance. So one of the big examples, again, I'll be picking on rocks and minerals a lot because I played that deck a lot, and I saw the changes that Ben made to his deck over the formats. Because if you look at where he played the deck last in BT25 and did well with it versus where the deck was when it initially first came out in EX10, and even when he took it to Worlds, like you could see shifts in his deck away from the OTK strategy because he knew he couldn't do that same exact type of gameplay anymore, even though it is the same exact deck. He started putting in more defensive tech and more recovery style tech just because he had to. So, like, I wrote down a little list. I'll eventually have to do a video on this. Um, but essentially, like, these are the major factors that competitive decks need these days. One, the highest levels of consistency, not just consistency, the highest levels. Two, cheesing on the memory system, in any way, shape, or form, whether that's playing out Digimon for extra cheap or digivolving for pretty much next to nothing. Then some ability that allows you to have rush, or then this card can make an attack, whether that's at the end of the turn or just as part of an ability, which goes into cheesing the memory system because now you could circumvent a lot of the weaknesses. Who cares if I give my opponent 10 memory if the game is over? Then you also would ideally want to have some kind of defensive play because you're expecting the opponent to remove your board every single turn. So having some kind of defense either against that or to prevent that is obviously ideal. Then high enough DPS to close the game within basically 2 attacks, like from your main boss monster. Then we have protection. So having sticky board states and resilience on top of everything else that we're already doing is like borderline mandatory. And then the last one is recovery plays, where being able to instantaneously get back into the game is like arguably the most important thing now on top of pretty much everything else. Is that kind of like where you're feeling as well?
Uh, More or less. Consistency definitely matters. The ability to kill quickly definitely matters. Um, I'm still kind of, new, just getting back into things, so to speak. But, it doesn't seem like it's good if you have the ability for a defensive counterattack if you need it. But it almost seems like if your deck is performing optimally, you shouldn't need that. But I also understand that that's not every single time anyway. So it's kind of here or there, but for the most, yeah.
Because it's one of those things where, like, I don't really see a lot of people actually talking about the actual shifts in the game. Like, people will just complain about power creep, but not really understanding where that power creep is coming from. And I feel like understanding these shifts, you could kind of pinpoint where things were breaking. So it's just like I gave the example earlier. EX11, we got so much more efficient than this card can just make an attack type of abilities. Well, you could very clearly see before EX11 they weren't doing a lot of that. And we were trying to actually play a little bit more honest and fair. And then, like, obviously comes around BT25. There's even more of that. It's even more egregious. There's more cheating on memory. And things are just spiraling out of control. I was talking with Tessero about this, and his number one issue with the game right now isn't necessarily the egregious amount of memory gain, because you could gain a whole bunch of memory, but if you don't have anything to do with it, it doesn't matter, which is like true. It's or like inverse, my bad. He thinks that it's the extra forms of it is the memory gain because of all of the aggression that we currently have. Um that's where his stance is. It's cuz he plays Beelstar as his primary deck. So, like, obviously we got into the talk of, like, what would they hit from Beelstar if they were to hit anything. And he's just like, don't hit Redbind. And everyone else is like, no, hit Redbind because that's what's causing them to kill. And Tessero's just like, no, you hit the cards that make Redbind broken. You don't hit Redbind itself just because there's other cards that are abusing it.
Yeah, like that makes sense. You hit Black Automon, like that card is crazy. Red Bind Trigger is a consequence of Beelstar's actions. If the Beelstar deck ceases to exist in a sense, or Red Bind Trigger kind of also does the same thing. If you can't get to your Beelstars and you can't do your thing, you can't burn them. You can't do anything. You know what I mean? And like Black Automon is the card that really kind of helps you get there. Like with Angels, Nyaromon is a really good card. That's not a TS or an Angel card. That really just helps you get there. Can you argue that maybe in Angels you should hit Shakumon that's still a 4? And should you hit Bind Red Trigger? Yeah, if you wanted to, give it that extra double tap of assurance, yeah, Bandai can do that. No problem. And they might. Sometimes Bandai does make those lateral kind of hits, and that's okay. But you kind of have to hit what the problem is. And my problem with Digimon is kind of simple. If I can't interact with you, if I don't have a chance to interrupt you when you're Beal starring all over me and you're bind red triggering all my security and I can't interact with that, like I can't do anything. I'm just, I'm still digging for pieces and there's nothing I can do. There's literally not a single action I could have taken to interact with that. That's my problem. Or if I'm fighting you with angels and I kill you turn 2, and all you've done is like evolved in the back, maybe played a couple tamers or memory boosts or something, and on play body, and I interact with you, and sorry, and I OTK you, and you can't interact with me, what is that? You're gonna sit there and you're gonna be like, this guy just comboed for 5 minutes, and there's literally not a single thing I could have done differently that would have changed that.
Yeah.
That's my problem with Digimon. If you had to sum it up in one instance, that's it. You know, if Digimon or any game for that matter shouldn't be like Solitaire. Solitaire deserves to be its own thing. But don't bring in Solitaire into other games that are not supposed to be Solitaire. You know what I mean? It's just
No,
stupid.
I agree. And it is kind of weird considering like did they not like again, this comes down to like designer negligence where it's just like did they not actually think about these things because it seemed pretty obvious when they did it with Hoodie and it seemed pretty obvious when they did it again with Beelstar and with Angels where it's just like these are just very hyper aggressively slanted decks that are obviously way overtuned doing way too much.
I don't think they're playtesting their cards properly. I don't think they're considering previous cards in interactions. I could be wrong. I don't have any concrete proof. This is just speculation. But we had our one team of developers, whatever, and testers, and they let us down to Apocalypse. And that was a big nope. That was they failed. They failed big time. Anubismon, they failed big time. And it seems like the playtesters currently are missing some marks. I don't think they care too much because, as we've mentioned, they want their game to be fast. They want it to be kind of solitary with a certain perspective, and they want it to be so that anyone can pick it up and run with it. And if that means, oops, we accidentally created a broken interaction, like with cards that have been band paired in Digimon's existence, if they go whoopsies, then what's a little whoopsies here and there when you're making millions of dollars anyway and introducing new people in the game every month. That seems just like collateral damage or anything. I don't know if they're really testing for everything because they probably don't care to, honestly.
No, because like I remember all of the talks and discussions of people wanting the egg from Rock's band and the level 5 from EX11 band as well. And now like you look at the state of the game now compared to when we wanted those cards banned and it's just like no, those decks aren't realistically doing anything, so they don't need to touch them. Because whatever they're about to print is just gonna power creep the game even more. So it's just like it's weird because like me right now specifically, I have very little income to invest in Digimon, which is partially why I play Reboot, is because the deck costed me like $30, and if I'm smart enough and I know what I'm doing, I can make it work really well. But I understand that that deck has a shelf life. The more, like, I know the deficiencies in the deck, and the more they introduce dual cards, the worse Rebootmon is functionally going to get. So the big problem that I'm facing, and not specifically me, but a lot of other people that I've talked to, it feels like Digimon also just got more expensive too. Not only just because of the new rarity secondary market people are finally starting to learn after two sets that, oh, these cards are actually just as common as super rares. I guess we shouldn't price them like secret rares. And I'm just like, well, no shit. But the fact that there's a lot of like stapley type cards for archetypes that just make decks borderline inaccessible. So it's just like you look at any Time Stranger deck, you need 3 to 4 Danon cannons. That's bare minimum $100 for just those cards, and then you have to look at what other stuff you need on top of that. So it's just like anyone looking to build TB right now, $250, $300 easily out the door without even a second thought. So it's just like if their ploy, obviously, yes, is to make money, but like secondary market wise, it makes it excruciatingly hard to keep up with the game when every single set they release something that the next deck people want to play or they're pushing is $200-300 every single time. And with the increased in amount of sets, that puts more pressure, like monetary pressure, on the consumer.
It does, and while it seems like the game is getting more expensive, you do still have your budget options. So, and you have that so people can't complain about it, right? You know, if you want to play Beelstar Mon, yeah, you're kind of SOL right now unless you want to spend the money, or Master Mon even, you're kind of SOL unless you want to spend the money right now. But if you just want to build Glowing Dawn, you know, go buy 2-star decks and a handful of singles and call it a day. If you want to buy Reboot Mon, go nuts. If you want to go, even Angels is relatively kind of cheap, especially if you're not playing Godomons from ET15. Deck is still pretty cheap, so go nuts. Um, and like that's just everything is getting more expensive, and I'd love to make this video. I don't know if I'll be making videos on the channel anymore, but a video I want to get, like want to make at some point, if I do, is yeah, the game is technically getting more expensive, but so is life in general. And when you have everyone's life and household expenses rising because of current things in the world that are happening, then, you know, not only is your life going to get more expensive, but so are your hobbies. And so is Digimon. You know, 3 years ago, Beelstar X would not be as expensive as it is right now. Reason that Beelstar X is expensive right now is because everything's expensive right now. So having an $80 secret rare like Death Xmon, you know, that's not a thing that you can reasonably, what's the word I want to use, get away with, so to speak. But people are taking advantage of the fact that the set that Beelstar X was in, which I was saying for a while, by the way, is a set that anyone barely opened. Boxes were still expensive. And, you know, now people have the absolute authority to juice up the prices because there's no choice. So you do get those outliers, but but you know, all that aside and real world talk aside, you still do have your budget options, and Bandai knows that, and the secondary player base knows that, and the sellers, the third party sellers of the cards, they know that too, and they know that as long as they can sell things that are budget, they'll also be able to sell things that are expensive, and everything will come out the wash on the other end. But that's just the world we live in now.
No, that's 100% true. Cause like monetarily, that's why I like took a step back from tournaments. One, because I realized I was having significantly less fun because the formats were not in particularly great. I still don't think the formats are particularly great for me to want to go back to being competitive, but uh, the basic death of online events for the most part was probably the biggest killer for me playing competitively because I don't have the disposable income to just travel all the time to the events. And right now, I think the event pricing is the worst it's literally ever been. Like this year's pricing structure is legitimately garbage.
I was actually hoping you were going to bring this topic up because as someone who has watched my videos in the past, I think you know that I take this event stuff very, very seriously and have very strong opinions on it. So I've been gone for a year, right? But last year, you know, there were barely any events, and half of them were still webcam anyway. Over the last, oh, and I'm not going to dispute the pricing thing. Ever since they got rid of Serial Omnimon as price support, which was a really good change, by the way, and I don't know why they didn't keep doing that, it's kind of been in the toilet. So, question for you is in the last 10, 11 months that I have not been here, how has it been with events and price support and all that stuff?
Well, prize support sucks. Not gonna sugarcoat it. I feel like we've gotten probably the worst batch of cards for regional stuff and for event packs that we've gotten pretty much since the beginning of the game, which is saying a lot. And then event structure wise, they're doing this whole like two nationals type thing where you have nationals A and nationals B, so they're breaking up the competitive season into basically the half years. And then it all culminates into worlds still. So I think that's kind of interesting. It's just I don't feel like they added any more events to the structure for the removal of the online stuff. So it's just like, okay, we went from let's just say 10 total events per half season or like per season, which is now half seasons. Um to probably about six of them, with one of them being actually online. So it's just like, from a competitive person like me, I know I'm not the best player, but I know I'm slightly above average. So getting to nationals was always a numbers game. It's like, if I play enough and I grind enough, I'll eventually get the run to be able to go to nationals. Well, now that there's less events, can't really do that anymore because now the math doesn't math anymore. So it just made it harder and more stressful to compete, which trying to do that for my own mental health was not good for where the current state of the game is, because I would just put more time and effort into something I wasn't necessarily in love with. And like, sure, we have good formats and we have bad formats, but like when you get stuck in those bad formats where that's the majority of the tournaments are in, because the tournaments are kind of clustered together for the most part, it's like, okay, we have tournaments in April, May, June, pretty much nothing for July, maybe something for August, nothing in October, and then the season resets, and then you have stuff in like November, December blitz, and then nothing for the rest of season two. So I'm not a fan of the current tournament structure, to be honest. Um, and I don't have proof or evidence if they're losing out on anything because of the changes that they've made, like lower attendance or like lower happiness in a sense.
Okay, that's interesting. I can run with that. So, as someone who's the majority of my card game life before Digimon was Yu-Gi-Oh! In Yu-Gi-Oh! Land, and this is still true to this day, you can basically go to a regionals every weekend if you're willing to drive or whatever. You know what I mean? You can go somewhere every weekend and you can play in a regionals. Am I surprised the regionals pricing sucks today? I'm actually not. You want to know why I'm not surprised? Because Yu-Gi-Oh! Regionals have had poopy pricing forever. You're not going to, if you're spending $300 to travel to a regionals with your friends, let's say, whatever, between gas, food, whatever, whatever. If it costs you $200 to go to a regional somewhere on a weekend, even if you win, you are not getting your money back. And that is just called basically a consequence of you trying to play the game in a sense. You're playing the game not for the prizing itself at that point. You're playing it for the love of the game or for the hunt. Um, Yu-Gi-Oh! Did introduce worlds points though from playing in regionals. And if you top enough regionals, and you do well enough at regionals, then you can do what just happened at Yu-Gi-Oh! Nationals, which was this weekend, where the top 16 people with the most worlds points get to play in a little locals basically, and the top two of that tournament goes to worlds. So like if Digimon did that, that would be cool. But Digimon used to have really good prizing, and this is coming from someone who used to top tournaments and win, back in the day. I was able to sell my regional winning prizing at one point for, 2000 USD. That's bananas. And I came in late technically because I didn't have the time to play competitively when competitive events were first starting. Those Omnimons you could win, you could sell them for 10 grand, more than that. And I think that, when the game was first out, 2, 3 years, you really juice the prizing because you really need to give an incentive to people to go to these events when they happen, by the way. And if the prizing isn't worth it, your brand new game is not going to survive. But now that you have a dedicated player base of tens of thousands of people, probably more worldwide, you don't need good pricing anymore because Bandai's got you by the balls. They know that you're gonna play and you're gonna like it. And if you get a little bit of pricing here and there, yeah, maybe you can get back some of your cost. If you do well enough, maybe you can redeem your whole cost. But that, for me, isn't a tantalizing offer. If and I was grinding regionals for a while there and getting the prize support like every regional I went to. But in today's environment, let's say if I drove to the States, I'm in Canada, eh? So if I drove to the States for a regional, I drove 10 hours or whatever, and I go 8-0, we're heading into round 9, then I'm playing someone else in the final round. And he's also 8-0. And he just fucking dumps, we're both playing TS Angels, and he dumps all over me before I can dump all over him. And that's the difference between first place prizing, which is a lot more monetary value, and not. I would I would be very upset. I'd be a good sport about it, but after the tournament, I'd be like, "Holy fucking shit!" Like this would be crazy, and I'd be angry. So I still think that Bandai needs to have more events. You know, and besides hiring more judges, I don't know if Digimon Bandai has more judges now for Digimon. I have no idea. I've been out of it for too long, but that was a big problem up
I
until a year ago,
I feel like they
right?
lost judges because they did a judge reset and a lot of judges didn't make it back in. I know
So
that for a fact.
like, how are you supposed to have more events if you take them away? It doesn't make any sense. If anything, they should be introducing more judges. And I know that this comment that I'm about to say might get some flack, but whatever. I would rather have more judges that maybe aren't as good as other judges, but then that allows you to play in more tournaments than not have any judges at all. Like that's like if that's the difference maker between more tournaments and not, I'd run the gamble of a ruling not going my way. Or I would play a deck, which I always recommended you always play the best deck in the format, right? Like I don't need to ask a judge for any ruling questions on the TS Angel deck. And I just, the cards aren't even at my mailbox yet. Like I don't need to do that, right? But if you're playing a deck with ruling potentials out the wazoo, that's where it kind of gets unfortunate, and it could be annoying. But yeah, um, I reacted to the regional list, so to speak, when I did one of my return streams, and there was like what 7 or 8 regionals in the
Yeah,
first season,
yeah, that sounds about right. And then we'll
or
have like maybe 4 in the next.
and that's just kind of not enough. If I really wanted to play Digimon back in the day. Like I really wanted to play it. I was testing for 20 hours a week type of shit. If I want to play Digimon, I want to play Digimon. Give me a chance to play Digimon. And don't give me webcam events that used to cap, by the way, in 10 minutes, if you remember that. And oh, I guess you don't get to play this regionals. Lol, sorry. Thanks for buying our product. Like, that's just ludicrous to me. One of my biggest complaints since this game came out was the lack of events. And it makes me sad and depressed to know that they still really haven't fixed that for what appears to be multiple reasons now.
No, and it feels like Bandai's big overall strategy, looking at everything that they're doing just past Digimon, it just feels like they're just trying to cross pollinate as hard as they humanly possibly can. That's why all of their regionals are card fests now, and why they're running all of them exactly at the same time. So that way, yeah, like look at the new Naruto game that's going to be coming out as an example. We're probably going to lose a lot of Digimon players to Naruto because it's the big shiny new toy, and people are getting frustrated with Digimon. But the big thing is, Bandai still has your money, which is all that they care about. They don't care what game you play as long as you play a Bandai game. And as long as they keep making more Bandai games, it increases the chance that you're just going to leave for another Bandai game. So it's a win-win situation for them, but for the player base, it's almost a lose-lose situation because they keep doing it every single year, every other year, it feels like. And the stupid thing is, they haven't learned from any of their problems from any of their card games. The first year of any Bandai game is just straight up fucked. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It is the worst experience to play a Bandai game within their first year because they have the first year problems where there's low supply, high demand. Then on top of that, the game is like dramatically imbalanced because they don't know what the fuck they're doing with it yet and they haven't figured anything out. So they're more prone to have bad formats in the earlier sections of the game that need a little bit more TLC. Then obviously, they're going to be not having all of the colors released right away, so you're not even privy to the full game experience until halfway into the first year. So, like, it's very hard for me to want to even remotely think about another Bandai game, but that's what it feels like their ploy is they don't care about the overall health of any other game but One Piece, and as long as you're just playing a Bandai game, they're happy.
I still remember when One Piece came out, and like I had the choice as a content creator, and people were asking and everything like, are you gonna switch to One Piece? Are you gonna switch to One Piece? One Piece looks like the future. Are you gonna switch to One Piece? All these comments, and I'm like, no, no, no. I'm gonna stay true to my friends and my fans no matter what, and stick to Digimon. Other content creators jumped off of Digimon, went to One Piece, and because of that, in some cases, they exploded and they did well and it worked out for them. But I stayed on Digimon, and as a content creator, viewership tanked, tournament attendance tanked, prizing tanked, uh, and still though, even though all that's true, Digimon still has their dedicated player base. They are still bringing in new players, and they're still making sales. So as far as Bandai is concerned, their strategy is working. And as long as all of our card games are making money, that's fine. It doesn't surprise me that other content creators either stop Digimon altogether or shift to a different focus. Gundam, One Piece, rip to those who went to Battle Spirits. That's sad. We pour one out for those people. But you know what I mean? It's just like it doesn't give you a warm feeling as someone like me who is more of a Digimon fan because when the game came out, I really liked the mechanics the game was offering. Um, One Piece never really attracted me, to be honest. Battle Spirits never really attracted to me. Union Arena never really attracted to me. Gundam never really attracted to me. Like, I wouldn't enjoy making content on any of those games in the past or today. Digimon, at least there's a chance that I would still enjoy it. And when it comes to viewership, I already know that if that's the route I go, it's going to be choppy seas because especially now with Naruto coming out in a year as a card game, you know Bandai is going to put all their effort onto that, and they're going to get all the cool new things, and all the cool, they're going to get the special smallest child treatment, as we call it. You know, you give everything to the smallest, youngest child. That's exactly what's going to happen. Are they going to mess it up when the game comes out? Is the product going to be scalped to oblivion? Absolutely it is. But they know they'll get past it because they did it with Digimon, One Piece, Gundam, Union Arena. They got past that original period, and it's going to be fine. And they know it's going to be fine. And they don't care about the scalping, obviously, or they would have fixed it by now. And that's going to be the direction. That's going to be it. And unfortunately, it just means that Digimon is going to get a little less favored in certain areas from now on. And that's just kind of been the way it is. It's the way that Bandai is choosing to make money. So as long as we continue to participate within the Bandai multiverse of card games, unfortunately, that's the reality that we have to tend with.
Yeah, I mean, we had some pretty good years in terms of Digimon content coming from Bandai. Cuz last year was absolutely insane with the Time Stranger game, the anime, and then all of the tie-in stuff on top of that. Like it was really good. We finally know that later this year we're going to be getting the mobile app, and then there's the new mobile app that's coming out like later this week, or by the time you're listening to it, it might already be out with Digimon Up. So we're getting two Digimon mobile games this year as well. So like in terms of content, we're in a pretty okay spot. There was the fan translation of the 3DS Atmon game. I know nobody but me cares about Atmon, but that's fine. To me, that's something. Now I get to experience that game, which I've not been able to before. So, like, content wise, it feels like Bandai's doing everything right, and Digimon is still one of their top four running IPs. So, like, card game wise, we're probably still second. Gundam, oh man, Gundam, when they said that they actually have to look at, like, changing the fundamental rules of the game, to me, that was the biggest red flag to not play Gundam that I've ever seen. That's actually what got me out of Yu-Gi-Oh! Was their master rule changes.
Really know much about that Gundam rule change, but you know, I would definitely have pause. Absolutely. The fact that they had to change, or I don't know what it is. I don't really want to know what it is. But if
It's
they had to
not
change a
yet.
major,
Yeah, they're
they
looking
had to.
into
It's
it.
crazy.
Yeah, because basically, like, the game was so hyper aggro that they had to, like, pair ban every, like, vanilla 2-2. Like, they had
Oh
to
no.
literally pair ban every single bear in their game because the aggro was that bad. And by bad, I
Hmm.
mean too good.
Well, am I surprised? No, I am
No,
not.
it's a Bandai game. All of them are aggro as like all hell. Every single one of them. You look at like every single one from the dawn of time, they're all hyperly aggressively slanted games. That's just a natural tendency of Japanese game design. They like like big flashy explosive moments, and they don't necessarily care about balance or skill or anything. They're just like, "Oh, that was such a cool combo. That was great." Like that's the high that they're chasing.
That definitely seems the way that Digimon is. You know, you can have your anime turn where like you bring your opponent's security to nothing and win. If
Right.
that's what Bandai wants, that's what Bandai wants, and that's what's happening. So I don't see any reason to suggest that's not what they want.
Yeah, and to Tesaro's point, when I was talking about this with him, he was just like, yeah, so instead of waiting 2 or 3 turns of setting up tamers and memory boosts, we just get more instant access at it, compared to in the past. And I'm just like, that's not entirely a bad take. I don't like disagree with it. Do I think that's the most enjoyable gameplay experience ever? That's something completely different. Um, I kind of enjoy like you more methodical, resource based, where you actually plan and strategize rather than I hope I pray I have my combo. And if I don't, I hope I pray my opponent doesn't have their combo.
And it shouldn't be that way. And I hear, I don't really hear much anymore, but from what I see, a common take, if you want to call it that people have, is that they'll talk about how there's a lot of variety in the game. And like, okay, that's technically true. There's a lot of variety in the game. However, if it's all doing the same thing, you know, you know, if I'm walking down to the store, right, and I want to get groceries, you know, how am I going to get there? Am I going to dress up in a suit with fancy shoes? Yeah, maybe. Am I going to go wear shorts and a t-shirt and sandals? Yeah, maybe. But no matter what I wear or how I go about it, the end of the day, the goal is still to go to the grocery store and get my groceries. You know what I mean? The end of the day in Digimon right now, because there doesn't seem there's any like security control or deck out or whatever. The name of the game is just how am I going to OTK my opponent on turn three? If there's 10 decks that do it, sure, I guess you get to pick what shoes you want to wear. But like, it's the same thing. It's just a different variation of what you do. And while I don't find that enjoyable, there are a lot of people that get off on that. I bet there are Digimon players that wake up in the morning and say to themselves, I can't wait to go to locals and win by turn threeing everyone with this deck. And I bet there are people that genuinely enjoy that. And I know it's a safe bet, because if that wasn't the case, the Digimon card game wouldn't be selling anymore. But that's just the reality that we live in. So it's not going to change anytime soon.
No, you're pretty correct on that. I think there's a lot less diversity than what people actually equate to. They'll just see the number of different decks and then be like, "Yeah, that's what I'm chasing after." You could look at BT25. I've done the metrics on this, and I showed it off on my streams all the time. There's like 20 playable decks, but if you actually look at the numbers that are right next to the decks, there's only 6 of them that are actually doing good. So I sure you could say there's 20 different playable decks that have topped in BT25, but realistically there's only 6 because those 6 make up 75% of what the meta was. And I don't think like that's been a normal trend for Digimon for a while. It's just when the spread of the divide is what's been different. So like I hold a couple of different formats near and dear to my heart because like I can point to those statistics and be like, this is what a healthy format looks like. It's not just here's a condensed of 6 decks that are doing good and then 20 decks that are not doing so good but got lucky. Versus like, okay, here's objectively the best deck, but it's not the leader by a significant margin, and that margin isn't significant compared to the second, third, fourth, fifth, and whatever. Like you have a much smoother curve in terms of deck distribution, in terms of its overall performance. So that's what I'm looking at. And then on top of that, obviously strategies like, hey, you have Beelstar and you have Angels. They're both able to turn to OTK, rip through all the opponent's security without the opponent even thinking about anything happening to them. Um, like, yeah, that does exist. Not everything is OTK. I will like as my counterpoint. I will say not everything is OTK. Bears doesn't OTK as an example. It kind of sits in the same camp as like Reboot, where it's just like I'm gonna do a lot of damage one turn, and then it's up to you to respond, or you just straight up die. But that's like the same play pattern as pretty much everything at this point. It's just like, oh, TB is doing the exact same thing, just differently, where it's just like, I'm going to do a lot of damage in one turn, and then you're going to have to respond to that turn. And if you don't, you're probably just going to die to Susanomon in whatever army I amassed at the end of my last turn.
I This is where it gets interesting because it kind of takes a like an extension or DLC on the last comment I made about everything is the same. So like you have different variations right now, right? You you have the 2 decks, Angels and Beelstar, that win the game by essentially by burning security. They don't even check it. They don't care what's in your security. Doesn't matter. Good luck. All right. Then you have, and they do that turn three, or we'll say turn two, two, three, whatever.
Yeah.
Then you have the majority of their decks that can kill you on turn three by just checking security the good old fashioned way, and maybe a little bit of burn here or there, whatever. But for the most part, the good old-fashioned way. Then you have your slow you have a niche of slower decks, like the reboot mon. I guess like bears too. I don't know much about bears. But I guess that seems like it falls into a little bit of a niche. But like if I'm a competitive Digimon player looking to play regionals every week, I'm not playing bears. You know what I mean? I'm playing one of the two decks that takes the system of the card game and turns it on its head, which would be Angels or Beelstar, because that deck ignores the memory gauge sometimes, and it burns security. I remember back in the day when security had to be checked. You know what I mean? And you had to deal with the consequences. If you flipped over a Hammer Spark or a Gaia Force, or and you flip over a Tamer and you can't kill them or whatever, you know, back when there were consequences to your actions if you attacked for no reason, or if you failed to OTK them and didn't account for a Hammer Spark insecurity or whatever. And it just seems like that's another fundamental feature of the game that was in full tact back in the beginning that's not existent anymore. So if you're playing the best decks, that is like even I don't know if you remember this, but BT9 Gen Con, I came second and first in two different tournaments on the same weekend playing Ancient Greymon. And I remember the only reason I played Ancient Greymon the one day was because I knew the previous night I was getting hung over and blitzed to all hell. Like, there was no way I could have played a deck from BT9 that required any kind of brain input whatsoever. So I said, you know what? I'll play Ancient Greymon. That deck doesn't need any brain input. And I came second. The amount of times that Ancient Greymon with Automon inherited, checked security, ran over options, didn't activate them, then I blitz all mid for game was disgusting. And then same thing the next day when I won that event with Ancient Greymon. Like, that was already unfair. And BT9, I remember, was the format. If you ask people when did Digimon really change, BT9 is an answer a lot of people will give you, and for good reason. And Ancient Greymon didn't even really play BT9 cards, I don't believe. It played all the old Ancient Greymon stuff, BT7 stuff, sure. It played Crimson Blaze, which was BT8. It played Gravity Crush, which was starter deck, or BT1 or whatever that was. Didn't play any BT9 cards, but sure as hell functioned like a BT9 deck did. And that was a problem. And that's when things started getting out of hand with security not being checked. Then BT14 started with the memory gauge not really being important anymore. And now in BT25 and EX12 meta, we have decks that don't care about either of those fundamental checks that when the game started were essential to keeping the game healthy and intact. Now it's a mess. And I remember when people were complaining about the inheritable protection from Greymon X and Garurumon X. I'm sure you remember that.
Yep.
People up and down, left and right, didn't matter if you were a seasoned veteran like me or some new Joe Blow. You hated that. And now power creep has gotten so out of hand that doesn't even matter anymore. Either everything has ridiculous levels of protection, or it doesn't matter because you're dead anyway. You could have all the protection in the world. If
Yeah,
you can't
either
get
that
to it
or
because you're dead, yeah.
yeah, either that or you just like don't care and you just instantly rebuild the board out of nothing because like that's just an easy thing to do. Like that's why a
Mm.
lot of the Time Stranger decks are doing as well as they are, is because they do ignore the memory system. Even though like you could say, oh, but they make a hard play off of their mega. It's just like, yeah, no other deck right now can just hard play their megas very easily, if at all. I mean, granted, now we're getting more and more assembly, so we're slowly catching up to what Time Strangers was already doing, um, because the value of their mega just outs entire stacks entirely. Um, and like then they just get incidental rush and then make an attack. Like that's why Volcanus is doing so well. Is because of that, where it's just like, oh, I just hard play him. He's gonna swing, deal massive amounts of damage. Then my tamer lets me use an option, and then that option lets me play a Digimon, and then oh hey look, my Digimon can then just make an attack. Like that is just unfortunately the reality of where the game is, and it has me like really really scared for where the future of the game is going to go, because we already know we're going to be getting Royal Knights support, we're going to be getting Demon Lord support, and then the scariest thing of all is we're getting X antibody support, because every single time, I kid you not, it feels like every single time they've introduced anything X antibody, something from it's been broken as fuck.
That's yeah.
So
Mhm.
the fact that they're going to have an entire set dedicated, a BT set, not even an EX set, even though the last like big couple of times X antibody stuff came from EX sets, it's just, it doesn't matter. Anytime they do a big X antibody set, something is going to break. And like, if we're already at this like this power threshold, like where's the game realistically going to go from here? And like, I don't think I'm saying like the game is going to die or anything. It's just like, as a player, it has me incredibly concerned, because now how often do I have to cycle through decks? Like, because just my case example, I invested in Medusamon, and now Medusamon's almost almost unplayable. It's not quite unplayable, um, but it's almost in that unplayable category. If you invested in, let's just say, Hoodymon, your deck is basically unplayable. It's not really unplayable. I'm being hyperbolic, but like nobody's playing it. It's not doing good. Um, so it's just like, now that we're getting more and more powerful stuff, like, okay, how often am I going to have to be rotating my deck? And like, that's why Digimon just fundamentally can't have rotation, is because it would not matter. Like, all of the new stuff that they're printing is so archetypical, it doesn't really play with a lot of the old stuff, and some of the old stuff actually might be keeping some of it in check or breaking it even further than what Bandai thought. And if it's breaking it even further, then Bandai's usually pretty good at banning that stuff. But like, it just, it kind of makes me worried about the future of the game in a sense, because I want to play Digimon, I really do, but and that's why I'm really hopeful for the mobile app, because that's going to be such a big game changer.
I've been worried about the future of the game for yeah a few years now. And yes, I always have to clarify this because if I don't, even if I do, some people will say I said it anyway. No, Digimon is not dying. Digimon isn't even close to dying. And if you want to know what dead looks like, look at BSS and look at the disaster that from day one to the end, that's death. No, Digimon is not there yet. Digimon isn't even close to that. And I've been gone for a year and I know that. However, uh, this is the current environment that we're in where things are fast paced. You don't necessarily need to interact. You just got to build your combo and call it a day and say thanks for playing with me. Thanks for sitting across the table. I appreciate that. And it's unfortunate, in my opinion, that that's the way we are because I don't like that. But again, some players truly, truly love that. And they think that that is the way skill is determined nowadays. So, whatever, you're not going to yeah, I'm not going to convince everyone of my arguments, and the people who argue the opposite are not going to convince everyone of their arguments. It's just, people have opinions, whatever, that's okay. I am really looking forward towards the app. I don't know if I'll make any Digimon content between now and the app coming out, but I've always kind of said that, the Digimon Elysian, I don't know how you say it,
Yeah,
when
it's
that
Elysian.
comes, Elysian, when that
Yeah.
comes out, that might be the re-entry point I need to like YouTube Digimon content. Cause I was thinking about just doing that, and I remember um, when I still was doing daily videos and whatever. I thought about a world like how would I balance what I'm currently doing right now, like market watches and stuff like that, with this? How would that even work? And like my thought at the time was maybe like a separate channel, something like that. But now, I haven't made a video in almost a year, and this would be a clean transition into something new, something cool. But I have to go in with the expectation that yes, it's starting off slower. It's a beautiful thing. You'll be the Digimon that I love and care for the most. It will get to this point where we are right now currently, and that is just something myself and everyone else playing it has to come to grips with. And it's really interesting. I remember going like a year and a half ago in Belleville. We had this new Digimon player to our locals who was like, not at the local level, doing really well, playing the newest cards and, whatever. I think it was Fenrir Lugamon Takumi Kazuchi. I think that was the deck he was playing, you know. Like that was a fun deck. But
I love that
anyway,
deck.
love that deck. So one of these days he actually asked, what was old Digimon like? I'd love to pick that up and play it because we still had a few of us in Bobble that was doing that. And I said, yeah, no problem. Sure, let's play it. That guy, I kid you not, barely won a game in old Digimon because he couldn't just Fenriluga Takazuchi all over you. It was actually a battle of attrition and whatever, and the guy was getting stomped, 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 stomped. It was really interesting to see. He didn't quite understand it, but we told him, the Digimon of 2020 and the Digimon of today, two different games. Yeah, the back of the cards are the same. Yeah, there's still memory gauge. It's printed on all the mats and all the little memory gauge dividers against starter decks. Sure, there's security. Yeah, absolutely. But fun, like the strategies and the deck development and the gameplay styles between 6 years ago and today, no, it's not the same. It's different. It's a whole different barrier to entry completely, both in terms of deck building and skill, technical play. So it's just a really interesting anecdote, and this is where we are now.
I think
This is it.
Yeah, I think part of it was because I don't really think Digimon had a strong sense of identity. So, and like that's seen through all Bandai games, more specifically, is like it really doesn't feel like any of them have a strong sense of identity. Like, I mean, One Piece from back when it started is probably different from current One Piece, to an extent, but at least like One Piece feels like it kind of knew what it was a little bit faster than Digimon, so it was able to take that development direction a little bit further. I also don't know if One Piece had 3 designer changes in their history. That probably didn't help Digimon at all in terms of getting like a foundation or an identity. So I feel like all of those macro level changes that they've done haven't necessarily helped the game because they just redefine what the game is every single time. So like I feel like that's the biggest contributing factor is just they still don't even know what Digimon is and they're still trying to figure it out, but where whatever it is, they're probably happy with where it currently is what I'm kind of getting the vibe of.
Oh yeah, as long as they're making money and the new Joe Blows are buying cards every month, sure. Let them do whatever they want. If they want to fix the game, there are definitely things they could do, like more biting crush like cards, like whatever. I actually think, you know, they should print more text on cards nowadays. I've had this opinion coming back a few weeks ago. If a lot of decks don't really care about security so much, can they just burn it away or remove it or whatever? They should implement cards with effects on them that say when removed from security,
More than just
do
yellow.
whatever.
Yeah, more than just in yellow.
Yeah, like it should just be commonplace. It should just be a thing that every deck, color, whatever has access to. Let it be a piece of interaction where, if I'm playing TS Angels and I Shakumon your security away, oh my god, it's a card that destroys a Digimon on the field when it gets removed from security. All of a sudden, hey, that'll change things up real quick. You bind Red Trigger, that same card, and destroys a Digimon on the field. That, that would change things a lot. So I think that would be a really cool way that they could kind of scale things, bring the game more to a battle of attrition. You still gotta get it in security. They still gotta print enough cards for it to really matter. But like that would be a really interesting take on something they could implement in the direction that they're currently going
Yeah,
that would help fix things a little bit.
because right now it feels like their big idea is this is probably just like a hyper niche interaction at this point. Their idea of interaction is more or less the new Venusmon from BT24 versus Strachiomon, where it's just like there's a lot of ping pongingness on each player's Digimon's effects. So it's just like, okay, I'm going to remove your Venusmon. Your Venusmon says, no, I'm going to remove your level 4 that you played out for free. And then my Strachio says, no, you're not going to do that. So I'm going to do something else instead. And then they could have like a Neptunemon that says, no, I'm not going to do that anyway. So like that kind of ping ponginess of abilities is like where Digimon feels like they want their interactions to be. Either that or it's like literally all stapled onto the rebuild stage where it's just like you outed my Digimon. Cool, I get to make another one instantly, try to out them, and then just ping pong trading levels, like slamming level sixes back and forth. Like that's really what it feels like the direction of the game is. And I don't necessarily think that's like awful, but I do think more trappy type stuff probably wouldn't hurt the game in a sense. You do have a little bit of like trappy stuff with like some of like the on deletes and like when this Digimon would be removed from the field, do X. Um, so there's a little bit more of that, but again, I feel like if they just like don't print turn 2 OTKs, which the game isn't new to, like Takami Kazuchi was a turn 2 OTK deck also, not as prevalent or commonly done, but still technically existed. I feel like that would be better. But nope, we got more ways to attack the opponent and have the memory system matter less. And I feel like that's probably the biggest sin that Time Strangers has done. Like, honestly, the biggest sin. Because, like, I look at rookie design just as an example. It's like, you look at a lot of the Time Stranger rookies. Oh, if I'm at 4 or less memory, I get to Digivolve for free. It's just like, how do you top that? Like, you literally can't top that because not every deck is going to be able to play around that. Sure, Time Stranger decks can because they can hard slam the level sixes, but not every deck is going to be able to do that. So it's like, what? Where do you go power creep wise from there?
It's where like the flip-flop of designers really matters because I think of Angels and I think of Beelstar. Those are two decks that, yeah, they got some new support, but it was older cards. It was Patamon, and it was Nyaromon, and it was Galamon if you play that. And in Beelstar's case, it was Beelstar X, and a couple old options too. Like that old support from a different design team, I assume, when mixed with the new design team's support, they I don't think they really took that into effect, so to speak. Uh, and it kind of creates a bit of a mess. I know that Angels doesn't see a whole lot of play. Some people even tell me the deck is kind of complicated, and that's why it's a real hard of the cards gauntlet. Is another thing I hear sometimes. But like at the end of the day, you know, if you can master the deck and if you can master Beelstar, who is gonna stop you? Besides someone else high rolling really high and like OTKing you before they can do it. That's just not the kind of Digimon that I would enjoy. It's not healthy. If they want to make more cards that would activate when the roof from security or whatever, that would interrupt, they probably should. You know, it wouldn't take a lot for them to print an extra line of text or two on each card, or a handful of cards. But
Right.
what do I know?
That's why I feel like if Digimon had like a stronger sense of identity, maybe we would see less of that, or maybe it would be more cohesive to where it doesn't feel as bad. Because it feels like the defensive decks are like grind decks. Like they don't actually strive to win. They just grind. So that's like the Olympus 12 slop and one of the other Liberator examples is Bees, where it's just like they're not winning because they don't actually seek to win the game. They're just grinding out the game hoping they do win. And then obviously all of the aggro decks are the ones that are actually winning. So it's just like,
Yeah.
okay, I get it.
In concept, it's really cool that you have decks that try to grind, but if the other decks are so aggro, they don't care. If those grindy decks are too slow, then they're not a factor. It's just unfortunate.
Right. And that's why I feel like a good clocker countdown deck like Royal Knights, as annoying as it is to some, I feel like having something like that as like your speed metric is very helpful. So that way you could be like, okay, how much faster is this deck than Royal Knights? And like you could just start using that as like a measurement tool of like where to gauge certain decks that you want in at least like from a testing side. That's what I would do, but obviously I don't necessarily think Bandai's doing is either no testing at all or the bare minimum testing to say, yeah, this functions.
It works. Yeah, I guess it's fine. Yeah, I don't know. I, uh, I, I do have no proof, like I said earlier, but I don't think they really go too deep with the testing. I could be wrong, but
I
I don't think I am.
Yeah, every Japanese company does it differently. The only other experience I have is like with I Spy Productions. They currently run Force of Will. Don't know how that game is still alive, but I mean, I guess that shows that like even the smallest, most niche fan base, if they still exist in a large enough number, the game can survive. Just look at Dragon Ball Super Masters format. Like that's arguably the worst performing Bandai game, but you still have that hardcore dedicated audience that's keeping that game around. So, like, that's why, again, me and Mario are in no fear of Digimon being dead, because obviously there's way smaller games that are surviving. But back to I Spy. Um, when I was familiar in playing Force of Will, uh, they had a testing team and then they let that go and then they did all outsourcing for their testing. And the outsourcing team was like legitimately terrible at their job. So like I don't know if Bandai has their own small internal testing that they had or have, or if they're outsourcing it. But I feel like something is being done, but it's just very clearly not enough. But with how much they're printing and compared again to Magic the Gathering, like Magic upped their amount of sets that they print a year. So did Digimon. This year more specifically. So it's just like, how can anyone check when they just have to keep making the new stuff? Like the second a set comes out, they're already working on the next one and the next one. And we already know from card game like development, they're usually already at least a year out.
Probably, yeah, they're probably testing BT30 at this point, and that's I don't even want to think about what BT30 is gonna have. I
Uh,
came back from a year and I'm seeing Digimon with option cards on the bottom of them and like all this nonsense burning security left, right, and center. I don't even want to think about it right this second. I'm just gonna
yeah,
ride the wave and see where it takes me, honestly.
I don't think dual cards are like particularly that bad yet. I think like it obviously could get worse where we're like actually not paying for them. Um, in the truest sense of not paying, because right now we're pseudo paying for them. Um,
Mm.
but I think like just because of the up amount of like the up level of protection, like they were just kind of like unfortunately a necessary evil. Otherwise, you'd get decks like Rebootmon where it's just like, okay, this thing is like like way more egregiously worse than anything Magnamon X wish it could be. Like no joke, Magnamon X looks like a child compared to some of the stuff we are currently playing with.
Yeah, it makes me like really really sad. Like when I got back, like full disclosure here, when I got back and I started looking at Digimon cards again a few weeks ago, I looked at the decks. There was nothing that appealed to me. There literally was not a single deck out of everything there that I thought, well, this is interesting. I would love to play that. And that was my initial impression. Then I saw the Angels play with my favorite Patamons, and I'm like, yeah, all right, fine. And then, Red Hybrid got some support. You can play Ancient Greymon again, technically. It's not the best way to do it, but you could. I'm like, yeah, I guess I could squeeze some juice out of that, so that's probably next. And then Galaxy Slop, from a deck building perspective, I I guess I could it would tickle me in a very funny place to try to make that work. I don't know. But I'm honestly grasping at straws. And if the Angel deck explicitly did not play the yellow vaccine engine, so to speak, to get started, I wouldn't have even got Angel cards. I would have just said, yeah, no thanks, see you later. But there was like that small, tiny glimmer. Patamon. That was it. Wasn't for Patamon, I don't know if we'd be chatting right now, to be honest. So I guess shout out to BT14 Patamon, whoever designed that card.
I
Really broken card, but
Yeah, I don't blame you. I went through it was almost a year ago. I went through like a massive burnout where I just could not find anything fun or enjoyable in the game at all. Um and it was just a very rough time for me because like I wanted to play the game but nothing was fun or felt good. Um
hmm,
so I 100% get it. Where it's just like just finding your deck is the hardest part. And then the other big thing is because the meta keeps changing so rapidly with every single set, who's to say how much life your deck actually is going to have? So I was having not really an argument, but conversation with an individual where it's just like they really want to play one specific deck. It's an old deck that nobody's really playing anymore. It's not that old. It's only like maybe 2 years old. Um, but they're having a real hard time into the current meta. And I'm just like, you have three options, buddy. You could either A, forget about your deck, play something good and current and modern. B, keep playing your deck, ignore what the rest of the game is doing, and have fun the way you could try to have fun, win or lose. Or C, stop playing the game. Those are your legitimate three options. And he's trying not to do option number three, but it's becoming progressively harder because he's not finding his deck and nothing modern looks remotely interesting to him.
that's unfortunately kind of correct. You know, tongue in cheek here, locals are really all you can play at right now because sometimes you get some store championships and sometimes you get some regionals. So like the bulk of the card game is played via locals essentially, and maybe that deck can get you through a locals. Maybe I don't know what that we're talking about here. Maybe it can, if no one else is really playing whatever. But it's just such an uphill battle. And like, if you're lucky, one of the 10 decks or so that you can play right now maybe has a Digimon line in it that you love, like me with Patamon, let's say. You know, maybe that says, you know what, maybe I play this deck because it's got this one Digimon I actually like in it, whatever. Or like some people are Gallantmon fans, and some people are War Greymon fans, and some people are, whatever. The Green Bird from Liberator fan. Maybe that's whatever, but it's so rough. If you're not playing the meta, it's so rough on you. Even if you're playing meta, if you're not playing like the best couple decks in the format, it's still like an uphill battle. It's kind of ridiculous, honestly.
Right. And I feel like going back to the list that I kind of read out on like what a lot of the best modern decks are doing compared to other decks, like obviously the deck that checks more of those boxes is going to end up being the better decks. And unfortunately with the big design shift with dual cards and just like how Time Strangers just fundamentally changed the game on top of that, it really limited the success opportunity for a lot of decks. Like you look at Imperial Dramon, which just got support in 8001, which was what, March?
Mhm.
Here we are 1.5 sets later, and it's unplayable. Like it's legitimately borderline unplayable, and it's like, oh, what happened here? I'm being hyperbolic. It's not technically, nothing's technically unplayable. It's just obviously it's not winning anything. So, and I thought the support that it got was really reasonable. It was really strong. It was topping a decent amount in 8001 and nowhere. Absolutely nowhere. Granted, it could be new deck syndrome where it's just like, oh hey, look, the new and shiny thing. Now I can stop playing Imperial Dramon and play something else. Sometimes that's happened where new and shiny, even if it's not the best thing, just might be more fun and more appealing. And sometimes it actually is actually that cracked, just like TB.
Yeah, but if Dan Vang ain't playing Imperial right now, no one is.
He's been
That's the fear.
he's been playing Medusa for a while. I don't know what he's playing now, but even when the new Imperial stuff came out, he was still playing Medusa.
Yes. That's
Yeah,
a testament. That's that there you go. That's all you need to know. There are there are cultural moments in our Digimon TCG and have been for a while. Like when I won with Yellow Hybrid, a lot of people started playing Yellow Hybrid. When I won the Ancient Greymon, a lot of people started playing Ancient Greymon. And people in the community are known for their pet decks, and they'll actually go and play and go out and buy the cards that their supporters, play. So like, you know how many people play Imperial, have played Imperial in Digimon's history because of Dan Vang? It's kind of crazy. Or like, other, iconic people. Ben probably convinced people to play rocks. You know what I mean? You have some people like Tessero that probably convinced people to play Beelstar. They said, "Yeah, sure, this guy's playing Beelstar. Looks fun. $500 for the deck, no problem. Let's just do it." Like it is kind of cool that that still exists to a sense. It's a lot less though. You, I would argue on my very limited experience returning here that that doesn't really exist anymore. I don't know. You could tell me I'm wrong, and I will accept that from you. But I don't think there are major followings anymore of people really trying to pilot something, and then they say, you know what, that particular person's piloting it. Then in massive numbers, people pick it up.
I think you're for the most part pretty correct. There's just way less followings in a set, like on average. Like you don't we like ever since the tournament structures kind of changed, we really don't hear a lot from the top players. And a lot of the content creators aren't necessarily super tournament heavy at this point either. So it's just like, where does that leave the followings then? And like the biggest YouTube content creator right now just is Vault because he's just putting in the grind and he's already 1 foot out the door trying to grind into another game.
Hmm.
Um, and expand his channel at the same time. So it's just like, I don't know. I know I don't have a big following. I've never really had a big following. I do, like I said, I'm a slightly above average player. I can top, not very frequently or often. I've never had a breakout deck where it's just like I made this deck good. None of those Kwang Zero moments where he just like does stuff with adventures and now he just recontextualizes how we think about adventures. Um, or Ben with Rocks. Ben with Rocks is probably the most recent example. I think like maybe Moman would be another one. He's another like older guard, but he doesn't really do a lot of like content. So people don't particularly know his name very well. Um Even though Moman slash Donkey Nog has been around for quite a while also. But
Yeah,
it's just the change in how we receive data and who's making content. Like I remember a while ago you said like, "Hey, the Digimon content scene's not good." It isn't. Has it gotten better? No, not
yeah.
really.
I, I, and yeah, I'm not gonna spoil anyone's sauce, but yeah, I've talked to a few people, and it's like, the people that make Digimon content, that it's not like a forever plan anymore. There was before One Piece came out. I'll be fully transparent. There was a moment in time where I thought to myself, you know, with everything as is, if the trajectory remains the same for me, I could have done Digimon for a full time gig between Twitch and YouTube. Like that was a thing that could have happened. And if I didn't win or top Digimon events, no, like that wouldn't have been possible. So there was that. But One Piece came out and that just destroyed that concept entirely. Had I swapped to One Piece, maybe, but we'll never know. That's at a timeline that is not familiar with us right
Right.
now,
Because
which is sad.
my channel more specifically, has plateaued since 2023. Like when 2023 rolled around, that's when the massive amount of growth that I did have just completely vanished. And now I just get
Yes.
like nominal levels of growth. And it's just like, I'm doing this out of my love for the game, not
Yeah.
to try to make this a career.
That's that's kind of what it kind of ended up being a little bit of a hobby, so to speak, more than anything. And I kept doing it. One of the big reasons is because I was helping people. Either it was through don't buy the pre-sales, or just competitive advice or anything like that. My even though when One Piece came out, everything kind of dwindled. You know, I still had the card shop at the time. I just decided, yeah, whatever. I'll just keep doing it the way I'm doing it right now, and if it turns into something later down the road, that's great. If not, then maybe transition to other forms of content, not Digimon, but just kept the dream alive. At the end of the day, I still, well, I don't know much anymore, but like up until a year ago, I still kind of enjoyed the game. The deck building aspect was still really savory to me. And even though, it was dwindling, it was still there. But I've come back after a year and it's like the game's changed. It's so weird.
I thought you would have liked Time Strangers a little bit more because compared to every other deck, Time Strangers feels like it is the most open ended because it is a macro archetype where everything just works.
And that's really cool. Um, and had I had not been forced to take a break for a year, I that might have been really interesting from a deck building perspective. But at the end of the day, it still goes back to problem number one. I might just be sitting there, my opponent might just OTK me, and I can't interact with that. So at the same time, it's like, would I have really enjoyed that? Yeah, I would have enjoyed building some decks, but would I have enjoyed actually sitting down and playing the game? I don't know. Maybe
I
not so much.
I think you would have enjoyed at least EX11. I think the EX11 format was probably pretty healthy overall. It not everything was well, I mean, I guess technically Rocks was at its like full power, but there was a lot of like good checks and balances. Because you only had one set of Time Strangers and not everything from Time Strangers was like hyper degenerate OTK compared to everything that they're doing now. Because you had the slower, control more orientated stuff come out first. So I think like you would have liked at least EX11,
That's
but
fair.
we'll never know because we can't go back in time, unfortunately. Not unless everyone else decides to.
There you go. That's true. That would be a movement, eh?
Yeah,
Hoping that the release of the new Digimon app will reinvigorate some older format people, and get some old blood back into the game. But we won't know till we know.
yeah. So I'm guessing you got rid of your shop or you finally sold it off.
I moved, so for a while there. I don't know anyone that knows me. I was doing the back and forth between Belleville and Ottawa, for a while. And for those that don't know, Belleville and Ottawa is basically a 3-hour drive.
Oh
I did that a
God.
lot, and that was just making money in the grind and all that stuff. But now I permanently, for the sake of my career, and trying to retire at an early age and make money, full time Ottawa. I had to leave Belleville to do it, so I couldn't keep the card shop open because I wasn't gonna be in Belleville anymore to do it. So I
Gotcha.
just said, yeah, no, not anymore. Can I still get back into selling cards, buy, sell, and whatever? Yeah, and I'm doing a little bit, getting my feet back into it, but that's all the card games. That's not Digimon specific. That's not Yu-Gi-Oh specific. That's just like, whatever. I ended up donating pretty much all my good Digimon stuff to my Bubble community before leaving, just so that if they chose to, keep it going down there somehow, well, they had all my cards to do it with, and a lot of bulk. I gave it to a really good price, someone in Belleville as well, as someone who just likes the grind of the bulk and whatever. I basically left myself with a handful of small boxes of Digimon cards, and that was that was it. I didn't actually think when I moved here that we'd be talking in a sense because I didn't know that I'd be turning my stream back on. You know, I turned my stream back on that first time a month ago just because I just felt like it. I was like, you know what? I'm really bored in this particular moment in time. Let's just turn on the stream. Let's see what's happening with Digimon. Um, you know, will that end up turning into something greater? I don't know. We'll see how the Wednesday tournaments keep going, and we'll see what happens when the app comes out. And maybe I can make some competitive content around Angels or something until a ban list happens. I don't really know. The future is still relatively unknown. And there's also like I'm just trying to like enjoy my life at the same time. I work really, 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 really hard nowadays in my 9 to 5. So I'm just trying to like really, really, really enjoy my not 9 to 5. And if that ends up being Digimon content, that's great. If that ends up not being Digimon content, it's gonna be what it's gonna be. At the end of the day, I just wanna, you know, enjoy myself. 2025 was a rough year, so now I'm really just trying to focus on good things.
No, I 100% feel you on that one. So I guess to kind of wrap things up, because this is a little bit longer of an episode than normal. Most of the time, me and Tesoro usually go about an hour and 40. Not that big of a deal. I'm pretty sure more people really like some of these longer ones, especially with like special guests like yourself.
Mhm.
Um, what in BT, because I'm pretty sure based on where you're at with your favorite Digimon and how you're approaching the game, probably nothing from Royal Knights to Demon Lords to X Antibodies is really going to tickle your fancy, but you might get a couple more Angel stuff in BT 26. So would you consider upgrading your deck for BT 26 pending what comes out on that?
Oh yeah, I mean the cards are already on the way, so I will write out where the angels go and see what happens, and we'll go from there. Right now, one step at a time. If
Yeah.
more angels comes out and they can see play, that's great. My chat, keeps telling me about Jupitermon, and I've read the Jupitermon cards, and I've read the TS Angel cards, and like while maybe I would enjoy Jupitermon, right now I just want to teach myself like what would be the best thing, and kind of go from there. See how I personally interact with that. See if I get sick of it or if it makes me want to adapt to something else. I don't know.
All right, because I know you get your Juno level 7 in BT 26, and then there's whatever Minerva's gonna do to, or Merva? The other one. Because
Yeah.
there's Minerva and there's Merva. So whatever the other one is that's coming out in BT 26, that also could potentially impact Angels as well. Um, Maybe the inclusion of a dual card. I don't particularly know. Right now we don't know like any of their effects, but I'm just trying to think like based on the information we have what could possibly be upgraded. Um cuz I know when you don't OTK, usually with Angels from my experience is they just try to floodgate you. They'll use like Venus or uh Diana or just sit on a large body or even ruin mode.
Right.
So,
I've definitely Venusmon and Ruin moded my fair share of people. Uh,
I hate those
fun, fun,
cards.
fun little side effect. My regular at my locals back when I was playing Venusmon and Ruin moding at people actually ruined some people's relationships with the Digimon TCG altogether. Like they just saw me do that over and over again, and they said no thanks, and they were out. I think it actually did more damage, retrospectively speaking, by me playing Yellow Vaccine and
Uh,
just doing that all the time. Crazy stuff.
I've ruined my fair share of communities too. I've only gone through around 3 or 4 different locals. The majority of them have died, so now I have to drive like an hour out to get to a locals, which right now I can't do. So I'm just like, oh shoot. But yeah, I've ruined my fair share of locals by just playing competitively, and like people hated it. Like they hated it.
That's really me though, right? I want to play the best decks. Will I, for the sake of content, sometimes back in the day, play something a little less competitive? Yeah, yeah, I will. And I'll try to make bad decks work. But like now I right at this particular moment in time with me being back in the game, I gotta see what the best deck feels like, what the best deck does, and what are, how it reacts to everything else around it. And that'll give me a better pulse right now than if I were to pick up like a fun deck or something. That's why I'm starting with Angels.
No, I think Angels being more modern probably is a relatively safe bet until a ban and restriction list comes and maybe something from Angels will be affected. I have no idea. Don't even know when that's going to be. But as of right now for EX 12, I was going to say EX 11. EX 12, Angels seems like it's definitely a very good pick. I think like we're coming to the conclusion that really it's just TB. That's the only good thing that came out of EX12, which isn't uncommon for one EX deck to be good. Um, but
Love
people are
when that
still
happens
gonna,
though.
yeah, this is gonna be one of the longer stretches. So we got like what 2 months before the next set comes out. So yeah, we gotta have fun with EX12 for a minute before BT26 comes in. And then BT26 is gonna leave almost immediately as soon as it came out because then we get EX13. So
In true Digimon fashion. Yeah.
yeah,
Sounds great.
literally. Yep.
That's fun.
But at least it's nice to hear back from you. Cuz I know you leaving suddenly and unless you like people were in your inner circle, people were kind of concerned for a minute cuz like some people knew it was more personal, others obviously didn't. I'm not going to poke in pride. That's none of my business. It's not what we're here for. I'm just happy that you're at least back in some capacity and you're having fun the way that you can.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, then we'll see where it goes. That's the best we can do right now.
Right. So, thank you, Mario, for hopping on. It really does mean a lot. I've been wanting to try to reach out to you for at least a year, was the last message before I asked again.
Yeah.
So it's been a while. So I do appreciate it. Where can everyone find you again in case they want to follow you or look at some of your older content?
My YouTube channel, Mario's Gaming World, the videos there are at least a year old for the most part, but you can see me there at my prime. And right now I am just streaming on Twitch a little bit. So if you want to find me there, twitch.tv/Mario Gaming World. Yeah, and I'll see you there.
Alrighty. Thank you again, and thank you everyone for coming out and listening. It really does mean a lot because without you guys, we're just a couple of goobers on the internet just having a fun conversation about the game we love. So thank you all again, especially the true heroes that made it to the end. You're the best ones, and we hope to see you all either on our streams or in some of our videos, either new or old. Without further ado, this is Zenitsu signing off.